story isn't over. My story's just begun. Failure won't define me, 'cause that's what my Father does. Failure won't define me, 'cause that's what my Father does. Ooh, lay your burdens down. Ooh, here in the Father's house. Check your shame at the door, 'cause it ain't welcome anymore. Ooh, you're in the Father's house. I know what you guys walked in here with tonight, but let these words be a prayer, a worship to our God about how good He is. Let's lay our stuff down.
Life's not the end game, the journey's very hard. You never want it perfect, you just want it right. The story isn't over, if the story isn't done. Failure's never final when the Father's in the room. Failure's never final when the Father's in the room. Lay your burdens down. Here in the Father's house. Check your shame at the door, 'cause it ain't welcome anymore. You're in the Father's house. Let's come home. Love is on the move when the Father's in the room. These windows fling wide, the dead come to life. Love is on the move when the Father's in the room. Miracles take place, cynicals find faith. Love is breaking through when the Father's in the room. Jericho walls are quaking, strongholds now shaking. Love is breaking through when the Father's in the room. Love is breaking through when the Father's in the room. Lay your burdens down. Here in the Father's house. Check your shame at the door, 'cause it ain't welcome anymore. Ooh, you're in the Father's house. Lay your burdens down. Here in the Father's house. Check your shame at the door, 'cause it ain't welcome anymore. Ooh, you're in the Father's house.
There's a grace when the heart is under fire. Another way when the walls are closing in. When I look at the space between what remains of me and this reckoning,
I know I will never be alone. There was another in the fire, standing next to me. There was another in the waters, holding back the seas. Should I ever need reminding of how I've been set free? name but the name that is Jesus. He who was and still is and will be through it all. So come what may in the space between all the things unseen and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. I know I will never be alone. Be another in the fire, standing next to me. Be another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me, I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I can see the light in the darkness as the darkness bows to him. I can hear the roar in the heavens as the space between wears thin. I can feel the ground shake beneath us as the prison walls cave in. Nothing stands between us. Nothing stands between us. Be another in the fire, standing next to me. Be another in the waters, holding back the seas. Should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me, count the joy from every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. Cause I know that's where you'll be. Count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. Count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be.
God, we ask that you'd be present here. You'd fill our hearts, you'd fill our minds. We love you. In your son's holy and precious name. Amen. You guys can have a seat.
We're going to have Scott and Brittany. Wow. Makes me sound like Beyonce or something. Goodness gracious. Dude, okay, never mind. We'll just strike that from the tape, please. Scott and Brittany, if you guys want to go ahead and come on up. Woo! All right, and then we got a stool for you right there and one more back there. As they are making their way up, just again, kind of as a way of recap, we are in our final week of our Faith in an Anxious World series. Over the past 4 weeks, we've been talking about what does it look like to live out our faith in Jesus in a world that has a lot of stress, worry, depression, or anxiety. Now, when we talk about anxiety and depression, we talked about on week 1 how we're not speaking to the chronic disorder while we're talking about the medical term of things. We're talking about the general anxiety that a person may face from time to time. So as a way of disclaimer, that is kind of the anxiety that we're talking about. But one of the things that I love about CCC is some of the unique things that we do. We have an awesome student community, if I do say so myself. Yeah, I give it up. We have an awesome kids community. We have a preteen youth group that's going on right now. They do some amazing stuff that happens on Sunday mornings is amazing. But one of the very interesting things that we have is called Community Downtown. So Scott and Brittany, would you guys just want to introduce yourself and then talk just briefly about what Community Downtown is? Yeah, slide it up. There you go.
Yeah, Community Downtown is a satellite.
Whoa. Sorry, hold on. Who are you?
Okay, all right. I'm Scott Hundley. And I'm on staff here at the church, but I'm located downtown where we have a satellite office. We do counseling for individuals and couples and marriage and family. We oversee all kinds of support groups. We have a lot of volunteers who also counsel, all funded by the church. And we average about 135 people at any time in counseling through our office. So it's a pretty big undertaking, but we love working with people. I'm married. I have 3 adult daughters, 2 son-in-laws, and my first grandchild coming in March. So, yep. And I want to say you guys are really honored and blessed to have Adam as your the director of student communities, but you're youth pastor, all right? Always appreciate that because he's got a good thing going here through God's work, so.
And I am Brittany Perez, and I work at Community Downtown also. And I do counseling with a lot of young folks, a lot of people about your age, and then also couples and all sorts of people. So it's really neat that we have Community Downtown through this church because I think it really shows people that we care a lot about mental health and that we see that as something that's really important and not just something to be brushed under the rug or ignored. And we see that as something that's very important to us. So, and just a little bit about me personally. I'm married. I've been married for 15 years and I have 3 kids. And yeah, life is fun.
That's awesome. Well, we are so stoked to have them here. And again, Community Downtown is such a unique thing. Typically, if you go to like a counseling office to receive one-on-one counseling or marriage counseling, usually they charge you a fee because that's typical. But we do all of our counseling for free through the generosity of the church, which is amazing. So if you show up for one-on-one counseling or coaching or marriage counseling or anything like that, it is completely free, which again is completely unique. So we're going to dig right into these questions. You guys asked some really great questions. At the beginning of our series, we allowed you to ask in some of your questions. So we're going to go through some of these. We'll include the questions on the screen if we have those. But the first one is just a pretty generic, practical question. And they ask, how do you cope with anxiety or depression? So just in a general sense, if someone has some anxiety, some stress, some worry, maybe even some depression, what is the best way to deal with that or to cope with that? Any of you want to start?
Okay, that is a loaded question, which I think maybe we'll be answering a little bit off and on through some of the other questions. So first of all, I like to divide out depression and anxiety. So depression, sometimes people feel depressed. We all have felt that way at times, but there's a big difference between being sad and just maybe like down because of expectations that we thought were going to happen, didn't happen, and we're down. That's pretty normal. But you go all the way over to the other end and you have like clinical depression where people are really depressed when really there's no reason to be depressed. So the best way to deal with depression, I think, are 3 main things. One is don't isolate. Don't stay away from Sunday night oasis. Don't avoid your friends. Really try to push yourself to be with other people because relationships are very, very healing. We were created to be connected because life is better connected. And get that? That's our tagline. Sweatshirts are now available at Community Downtown if you want to buy one.
Those aren't free, though. Those cost money.
Those cost money.
That's where they get you.
Yeah. Anyway, so with depression, but, talk to someone. So don't isolate. The second one is physical activity. It's very easy when you're depressed to sleep way too much.
Or stay up too late and then sleep all day.
Right, because then you're not getting enough sleep. But you've got to have the right amount of sleep, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So physical activity, exercise, walk, go somewhere, do something. Staring at your phone all day, laying in bed is the opposite of what you need to be doing. The third thing is spiritual. So focus on your spiritual life. We are created, and if we're a follower of Jesus Christ and have made that decision, we've been given the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is the counselor and the comforter. Now, not that that's just because you pray, everything will be great. I'm not telling you that. But if you kind of focus on those three areas, I think that will help with your depression. And then anxiety is basically, there's a whole continuum of anxiety. So we'll just kind of come back to that one later, if that's okay.
Yeah, Brittany, anything you want to add to that?
And also, if you came to counseling, or even if you did some research on your own too, you would be able to find a lot of different skills that you could apply to anxiety or depression that can just kind of help you get through a tough time with that. Like just maybe changing the way you're thinking about a certain situation, or some of my favorite ones are when you're feeling really anxious, just grounding yourself by naming something that you can smell or touch or feel, or even just counting backwards from 100. And that somehow just kind of calms us down for a few minutes. So there's also a lot of things like that you can learn too that help sort of get you through those paths.
Yeah. And I would say, a majority of us here, some of us may be in that anxious or worried state right now, or even over the last week, but some of us maybe haven't even experienced any of this before. So a lot of this may be like, whoa, I'm not ready for this yet. But again, I think this is really helpful information to know, especially later on down the road, whether it's something that you personally deal with or something that we'll talk about later on, someone you know is going through this. So I think this is really helpful.
So with anxiety, I wanted to say something with that. So if you've never experienced anxiety, then you're probably lying, because I think we all experience it at times, but I think it's important to divide it out. So on one end, we have nervous, and I was nervous speaking tonight. I speak a lot, but I was nervous, almost to the point where I thought I was anxious. And I was driving back from Bloomington, and my mind was kind of rolling like, oh my gosh, I've never spoken to the high school kids, and they'll probably hate me, And you start telling yourself these things that are lies. And so when you're nervous, I think this is really key, I think. That doesn't necessarily mean you're anxious. Flip it. Nervous is a good thing. So if I'm preaching and I'm nervous beforehand and I'm pacing, I'm probably going to be motivated. I'm getting adrenaline. I'm getting energy. I'm going to start really making sure I know what I'm doing. I'm going to step it up. So flip it and be thankful that you're nervous. Because a lot of times if we're too laid back and not nervous about something, we might fail. That doesn't mean you're anxious. And then all the way over, you have worry, you have fear, and all those different words, which we'll talk about later. But we all have that different places at different times, that continuum.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and go to the next question, because I think that ties in really well. And Brittany, I'll start with you. But let's make it really practical. So again, we have middle school and high school students here. But how do you deal with stress or anxiety in school assignments? So again, this is another thing that we can stress a lot about. So what does it look like to navigate those two things? If a student feels stressed or anxious or worried about school assignments, how can they maybe navigate that?
Okay, well, I'm probably not the best person to talk about this one because I have a reputation for procrastinating, and I always have. I remember in college, my professor said, okay, every day you need to write a journal entry. And I'm like, well, I'll do it at the end, it'll be fine. Well, then the professor, towards the end of the semester, said, okay, your journal assignments are due tomorrow. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to write 120 one-page journal assignments. That was a lot to do in one night, but I ended up doing it. But story is that ended up causing a lot of unnecessary anxiety. And I think I have learned from that, and I've learned to sort of pace myself these days if I can. So that's probably one thing that I would suggest is try to pace yourself and not procrastinate, which eases a lot of that stress and anxiety that comes with assignments. But then also I think remembering to perspective, like, yes, it's an assignment. Yes, it's important, right? Like we have to get it done. But in the grand scheme of things, how much is this really going to matter? You want to get your work done, but at the same time, like, life is important too. So I think that helps kind of put things in perspective and calm down a little bit about the assignments. It's okay. It'll be all right, And that always helps me too. So.
Good. Yeah, Scott, anything you would want to add? I know you're an excellent student, just a really.
I am just like Brittany when I was in college, just like Brittany. But did well when I just put my mind to it and buckled down. I think stress and school assignments, there's a lot of pressure. And so instead of just school assignments, let's talk about just school. There's a lot of pressure now that you're supposed to, by like your 8th grade year, know what you're doing the rest of your life. You know, you've got to know what career you want and where you're going to go to college and where you're going to get the money. And that may be an exaggeration, but really they start talking to you early about it. First, everybody's different. You may have that friend that's got it all planned out, and if you don't and you don't feel at peace about it, that is okay. There's a lot of people that go into college and regret the school they went to or the career they went into. Take time. More and more people. If you're a senior or a junior here tonight, a lot of people are taking a gap year just to work and save up money or go in the mission field or just do something. And don't let society pressure you into being somebody that God has not called you to be. Not everybody's a great student. You don't have to go to college. You can support yourself financially by going to a trade school or just being an entrepreneur. So just don't allow the stress to take you when it comes to school. Yeah. Now, it's not good to tell your parents that all the time or tell your teacher that, but up here
is this really
is how you
gonna
think.
Matter? No, sorry. Yeah, fun fact, I changed my major in college my freshman year alone 3 times, so I didn't know what I was doing. There's that. So since we're sharing from personal experience, I thought I would lead the way with my vulnerability. All right, here's another question we got, and this one's a little bit vague, so maybe we can flesh it out, but it is, why do we get anxious over small things? So again, a lot of times we're trying to gain perspective, sure, maybe something is, in the grand scheme of things, not all that important, but sometimes it feels like we can't help ourselves, but worry about maybe a friendship, a relationship, a school assignment, maybe something that someone posts or says on social media. So again, this is a broad question, so feel free to take it and run with it. But why do we get anxious over small things?
I think oftentimes what happens is we have an incident that happens and then we automatically assume the worst case scenario. Something small happens and our mind jumps to the absolute worst conclusion and we have already assumed that's going to happen. And so just slowing down for a minute and saying, hold on, this has not happened yet. What are the chances of it probably even happening? Probably slim to none. And just sort of back up for a few minutes and take a deep breath and realize that it's probably going to be okay. So that's probably one of the main things I would say about being anxious over small things. You have anything else to add to that?
So repeat after me. I am not a fortune teller.
I am not a fortune teller.
That's where a lot of anxiety happens, is we think we know what's going to happen. We think we can predict the future, and we can't. It all starts right here in our mind. Let me give you an example. So this was several years ago. I was at small group, and at the end of small group, this is a true story. I'm not lying. I guess I shouldn't have had to say I don't know why I said that.
Thank you for letting us know you're being honest now. Now we know.
Being honest this time, no. But I had this stiffness in my arm, and it was numb, and it was really weird, and I was like, what's going on? And so my friend, I'm not going to say his name, but he goes, are you all right? I said, well, my arm feels really numb. And he goes, oh my goodness, that's like the first sign of a heart attack. Seriously, you need to get that checked out. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm starting to get nervous. And I'm like, oh, my arm is stiff, He takes me to the ER. And I was seriously, and we were Googling it, and it's one of the first signs of a heart attack, possibly, or a stroke or something that your arm is really numb. And I go in there, and I am just worked up. I'm pacing, I'm panting, I'm laying there. The doctors run all the vitals. They come back, and they said, you are completely fine. I think you just had a panic attack. And I'm like, what? And so he explained it to me, and I'm like, I know what panic attacks are, but I never thought I would have one. Well, what had happened was, it all starts with how you think, all right? We think either the truth or a lie, and I was believing a lie. I did not know this. I believed I was going to die with a heart attack, and I started believing that, which then caused me to act out. So how we think affects how we feel, and then how we feel, that's how we behave. And so those little small things we get anxious over, we need to think, what is the truth here? So-and-so didn't speak to me today. Oh my gosh, they're not my friend. They don't want to be around me anymore. I'm not going to have any friends. When the truth is, maybe the friend was sick and is just feeling down themselves. That's all it was. So we tend to be irrational instead of rational. So sometimes we're thinking a lie. We get really anxious over something small. We believe a lie.
So moral of the story, don't Google your symptoms, because then you might think, no, I'm just kidding. But that's true, though. But I love what you say, though, because what we think affects how we feel. And a lot of times what we think will happen or what we think is going on is sometimes to the nth degree. But Scott, you mentioned something really interesting that actually ties into our next question. It's a phrase that we toss around a little bit. But what exactly is a panic attack? And is that the same thing as anxiety? So, you may hear, oh man, I'm having a panic attack or something like that. What exactly is that? Is that the same thing as maybe being anxious?
Go ahead, Scott. I'll add on if I...
All right, Brittany will add on. So remember I talked about nervous, kind of being over here, we all get nervous, and then we have worry and stress and fear, and then anxiety. Clinical anxiety is where it's overwhelming, and it affects relationships or work or school, and we can't control it, okay? It gets extreme. A panic attack is where anxiety all of a sudden just overwhelms you, and you kind of lose thoughts, you can't even quite know where you're at, and you get so overwhelmed. One thing I hear a lot of people say when they have a panic attack is they feel like they've got a concrete block on their chest, and they can't breathe, and maybe hyperventilate. So no one has ever died of a panic attack. Everybody gets through a panic attack. And a lot of times people have them but don't realize it. And it's very important to get some clinical help. Do you want to talk about how to deal with it? Or you want to
Well,
add
I was
whatever?
just going to add that, especially if you don't know what's going on and you've never experienced it before, it can be so scary. So realizing sometimes that with the panic, you are going to get control back. You are going to start feeling better, and that you'll calm down shortly. I think that's important to remember that, because it can be very, very frightening when you're in the midst of having a panic attack too. And if you're around anybody that you trust, grab somebody that's with you, have them sit with you for a few minutes, go to a bathroom. Sometimes just feeling something that's cold by taking a drink or holding an ice cube in your hand or popping a piece of gum in your mouth can help you kind of snap out of that panic attack quickly, and you'll start feeling better.
Yeah, that's good. Well, we got a couple more questions here, but again, I hope that this is something that you're able to kind of resonate with, and maybe it's helpful, maybe something that you've experienced or you know someone that is experiencing this as well. But now we're going to get into some practical questions, especially in regards to friends. And I'm just going to make this quick announcement real quick, but next month we are starting a brand new series on friendships, relationships, sex, dating, all that good stuff, right? So you'll want to be here for the month of February. We're going to be talking about that more in depth. That's right. No. Oh, man, thoughts reeling back in, Adam. Okay, here we go. But we're going to ask another question. Brittany, I'll start with you. But this writer asked, how do you deal with a loss of a broken friendship? So again, there's a lot of, ebbs and flows and friendships in high school and middle school. Sometimes that can come with its own stress and worry and anxiousness and trying to work through this. But what would you tell someone if they asked you, how do I deal with the loss of a broken friendship?
First of all, I would say, that is so tough, because chances are you had feelings for the person who you were friends with, not feelings like love feelings, but like feelings. You cared deeply for them. And so the loss of a friendship is just like the loss of any other relationship where it can be painful and it can be really hard. And so first thing is just to show yourself grace that you are probably going to be sad about that loss of the friendship. And chances are they're probably sad about it too. And so giving yourself the time to heal from the loss of that friendship. And it may even take time to gain trust back in other people or other relationships after you've lost that friendship. And then secondly, kind of getting yourself back up and getting your confidence up and saying, okay, like that didn't work out and for some reason this had to be over, but I am still great and I'm still worthy and I know I'm a good friend. And so I'm going to move on and I'm going to be a good friend to the other people in my life who I can be friends with. And so kind of just giving yourself that pep talk, like, I am good, I am great, and I have a lot to offer. I think finding that inner self-confidence and really sort of pulling that out is really helpful when you have just had a loss of a friendship.
Yeah, and I think it's important to kind of distinguish two types of broken relationships. I think in one area, there's the natural friendships that you'll have that kind of maybe you're really close with that person, and then over time it just kind of dissolves. Maybe you're not as close, you don't hang out as much, that sort of thing. And that's just the natural part of life. You know, you'll be really close with certain people at certain points in life. Other times, maybe you guys start to drift apart, and that's okay. You're going to have those relationships. But then there's this area of actual broken friendships where something was done to you, something you did to the other person. There's some of that where like there's been an offense that's been made. So Scott, anything that you would add on just how to deal with maybe a broken or a loss of friendship?
Yeah, so a couple of things. This may not be much of a consolation, but like for me, I've only got like 2 or 3 people that I was friends in high school that I'm still friends with. So you will, like Adam said, you will have people come through your life, in and out of your life. What I've learned is that I don't need to be friends with everybody. I can be kind and I can be friends, but to really zero in on that small circle of people that I really trust and to develop that friendship instead of worrying about every relationship I have. I think that provides some sanity. And if a loss of a friendship, I mean, you can't make someone be your friend. And would you want to make someone be your friend? And so sometimes when we have a boundary or someone moves out of our life, it frees up opportunities for other people that we can connect with. And so trying to be positive about it. But also, it's important not to be bitter about it, to forgive. To forgive someone doesn't mean the relationship is going to be great again, or that it didn't hurt, or that what they did was okay. It just kind of, God calls us to just free up, let go of that bitterness so we can move forward. So I think that's important.
Yeah, that's good. And I think that piece of forgiveness is so huge. I heard a quote one time that says, forgiveness frees you from the cycle of bitterness. And bitterness traps you, right? It lets you focus in and zero in on the incident. And it can really stick with you. I've met people who have been unforgiven or have been harboring bitterness and anger towards people for years. And it's amazing, like even seeing them, like seeing some of that stuff come out of them, it's really interesting to see. But what you're saying, Scott, is a piece of this is in time you choose to forgive. It doesn't mean what they did was okay, but what it means is I'm not going to let this affect me anymore. You still work through it. You still have to choose to forgive every single day, but it's a bit of that process. So this ties in again with our second to last question, and there's like 3 questions jammed in here. So this is from someone's personal experience. But if one of your friends says something that hurts your feelings, but they didn't mean to, how do you react? Is it a sin if you don't forgive them? Does that make you a bad friend? So a lot of questions jammed in there, but let's say there's an instance where someone says something that's really hurtful to you. Like, how do you process that or work through that?
Well, my first question would be, they don't know that they hurt your feelings. Well, then the thing that needs to happen next is you need to communicate that with them, because people are not mind readers and they don't know necessarily if what they said hurt your feelings or not. And so for you to have the confidence to say back to them, what did you say? I'm sorry, that really did hurt my feelings, and that's not okay with me for you to talk with me like that or to make me feel that way. So I think really one of the first things that's so important in any relationship, but especially friendships, is being able to communicate effectively with people. And there's a spectrum of communication. We have passive communication, where I'm sure you guys have heard examples of that, where people are, they say things in a passive aggressive way, or they don't really say it because they should know by how I'm acting, or, that sort of end of the spectrum. And then there's the other end where I'm going to just say it how I want to say it, and they can just get over it. Because, and that is aggressive communication, and that is also not effective. So we want to find the middle balance, which is effective communication, and that's just kind of like an easy balance of the two, okay? So it's speaking truth, but it's also being loving. And that's what you want to do with your friendships, especially to avoid miscommunications like, you hurt my feelings. So that's probably one of the first things that I would say. And Scott did touch on forgiveness, so I'm going to kind of skip over that part, but I definitely think it's important to forgive for your own well-being and for your mental health. That's...
Got anything? One of the interesting things, though, that I think through all this is, one of your friends says something or does something that hurts you. I think a tendency we have in psychology and counseling, it's called triangling. So pretty much what happens if Brittany really makes Scott upset, she was trashing on his sweatshirt. Okay, like it's actually a pretty ugly sweatshirt, and so she's making these comments about Scott, and it really hurts him. So instead of Scott addressing Brittany and her comment, what Scott would do, or this isn't what he should do, but this is oftentimes what happens, is Scott will come to me, have a venting session, and then move on from it. And so the conflict between Scott and Brittany actually never gets addressed or resolved. Typically what they do is they bring in a third party or a third person, and they just vent their feelings out so that they can move on and feel better. And while I think that may have its time and place, that's a really dangerous trap that we need to be aware of because it's not addressing the relationship between Brittany and Scott. Sorry to pin you guys against each other. I hope everything's going to be okay and you guys work it out. But that is something to be aware of. If you do have conflict with someone, conflict isn't a bad thing. Lean into that. Address it in a healthy way, just like what Brittany was talking about. But watch out for the venting sessions or, hey, I'm just going to bring in this person so I can feel better about it. There's a big difference between a venting session and seeking godly wisdom and counsel. The last question that we have here is kind of wrapping things up. But what does a student do if they have a friend that is depressed or suicidal, or I would say even anxious? So, oftentimes I would say this last year has been pretty wild. Would you agree? And I think there's been moments where either you yourself or someone has had that bout of severe anxiety or depression, or even experiencing some suicidal tendencies or thoughts. So what would you tell a student if they have a friend who is in that situation?
And also, there's a couple things we want to share after this, okay?
All right,
I just want to
fine.
make sure.
Is everything okay
it's about
between
some
us?
tools. Nope.
Okay. We'll talk afterwards.
I'm going to tell Brittany.
Brittany, can I talk to you afterwards? I really got to.
So if you have a friend that is depressed or suicidal, first of all, don't fear talking to them. Be bold, have courage, ask the question straight up. Question, are you thinking about killing yourself? What exactly are you thinking about doing? Don't dance around it, okay? It's okay. Persuade them, QPR, question, persuade, refer. Persuade them, you don't need to do that. Involve adults right away. Tell someone. Now, you may be told, don't you tell anybody I told you this. Life trumps everything else, okay? If you tell someone and someone gets help, you may save a life and they will get over that. They will understand why you did that. Don't start playing all the mind games of, oh no, should I tell anybody? They told me not to say anything. Always break confidentiality if someone is suicidal. That's the main thing.
So just to sum up real quick, you said QPR. I don't know if they'll remember that, but question, persuade, refer.
Refer to someone else, an adult.
So if someone communicates and says, hey, don't tell anyone I told you this, but like I think I might like commit suicide, I have a plan or something like that, that person should talk to them, refer them to an adult. Or how should that go about? Like if they're texting them, right, and saying, hey, like I'm struggling, man, like what does that look like? I just want to make sure it's as clear as possible.
I would say if it's via text, I would be very proactive. And instead of avoiding or, again, like Scott said, dancing around the subject, I would immediately call them or get over to their house and I would find out more about that. What is your plan? How long have you been suicidal? And then using the persuasion method, like what Scott said, and then automatically involving an adult that can help you and the person out.
Like it might be a text, then in between texts, tell your parents, tell someone right then.
Good. Anything else you were going to add off of that? I know I interrupted you, but I just wanted to make sure that was like as clear as possible because, again, there's a lot of different, phone call, text, in person, all that stuff. So checking in, texting them, asking them, are you suicidal? Do you have a plan? Letting an adult know, all that stuff. So anything else that you would add to what do I do if I have a friend who is in this situation?
I mean, I think it is a really scary and intimidating subject, and so people want to avoid it and they don't want to say the word suicide. They don't want to say the word plan, all of those things. But the more you do talk about it and say those words, the more it actually helps that other person. So we're just making it more taboo. We're making it more, shoving things under the rug when we don't use those words and when we don't talk about them.
Awesome. Well, can we give it up for Brittany and Scott for coming and sharing? Scott, I know you wanted to close with a couple things.
Yeah, we had some tools we wanted to share with you tonight about how much time we have. Are we over time?
You can have a couple minutes if you have.
So how to deal with anxiety. So a couple suggestions. One is there's a big difference between fear and worry, and I think that's important. Fear is about something that's likely going to happen, and worry is about something that likely is not going to happen. Worry is more where we get anxious. Fear, like if I didn't know how to swim, and I find myself on a boat, and everybody's shoving everybody off into the water, and nobody has a life jacket, that's fear. That's normal for me to have fear, right? But if I was on the swim team in high school, and I'm really fearful of that, it's just ridiculous worry that I'll be okay. So try to divide that out. Think the truth. And then something that helps me that I heard somebody speak one time is if you feel really anxious or lonely or just really in a down place, find a song that's your song. And I call this pairing. Take a song that does not have lyrics, an obscure song like an instrumental song, and pair it with a scripture or a phrase or something. So like I have a certain song that I use, that I play, which is an instrumental song, and then I have a scripture, which is in him we live and move and have our being. And so when that song comes on, I say that prayer, or I say that scripture in my mind, and through time, then I'm calmer. And so that's the only time I play that song. So my brain, there's studies on this, your brain starts to recognize that it's time to slow down. Second thing, figure out how to not have your phone with you all the time. If you're going to be anxious, you do not need your phone all the time. It is the worst thing to do. And also, get some sleep. Don't lay in bed on your phone for 2 hours every night. You're not going to be able to sleep because you need your sleep to fight off depression and anxiety. That's a big one.
That's good. Yeah, Brittany, anything to wrap up?
Nope, I'm good.
All right. Well, again, we're just so thankful that they came. And if you're interested in counseling and getting some counseling, maybe you're at that point where it's like, hey, maybe I need to take some of these steps to pursue one-on-one counseling, then they can fill out a form online, correct? Would that be the best way to
Yep.
fill that
The
out?
parents fill it
Their
out.
parents fill it out
Yeah.
and go from there.
And Chad passed out some flyers for some groups. We're starting the end of February on Tuesday nights for a girls group and a guys group. So you might want to check that out.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, this has been kind of a heavier series, but I think this is extremely timely. With everything that's going on in the world right now, we want to equip you when you do experience worry, fear, anxiety, or depression, that you can start having some of those tools to walk through that well. And so, again, if you have any questions whatsoever, or if you want to touch base with Scott or Brittany right after this, we'll stick around for a couple minutes. Feel free to come talk to us. But right now, we're going to transition to our life groups. If this is your first time here and you don't know where to go, come see me afterwards. We'll get you plugged in. But let's go ahead and transition to our life groups at this time.